the initial plan to pull the car around back, and then they had to abort mission, and the driver came up on the circle driveway instead, and then they went out the front door. Part of the plan was to remove Nancy via the front door.
While no formal accusations are leveled against specific individuals here, this investigator's legacy was forged on the floor of countless crime scenes. Not in a figurative sense, but physically down in the grit, wielding brushes and specialized lighting to bleed secrets from textures that appeared utterly unremarkable to the untrained eye. Maureen O'Connell served as a high-ranking operative within the FBI's evidence response team, a premier forensic division synonymous with clinical precision. Her role transcended typical detective work or the psychological guesswork often associated with criminal profiling. She occupied the silence left behind once the initial responders retreated, possessing a clinical gaze designed to isolate what every other investigator overlooked. Upon the public dissemination of the aerial surveillance captured over Nancy Guthrie's estate, visual data that left observers frantically scrubbing through frames in a state of agitation, O'Connell applied her cold, professional discipline. Her focus bypassed the obvious, the gates, the entryways, the windows to settle exclusively on the concrete span of the driveway. It was the absence of evidence, rather than its presence, that sparked the persistent interrogation she has pursued from the start. To understand O'Connell is to understand the stakes. 67 days into the Guthrie mystery, Brian Anton secured an exclusive sit-down with her. My immediate priority involved scouring that pavement for rubber signatures. From the second that aerial camera ascended, only a solitary pair of tracks was visible. Dedicated observers recognize Anton as a rare fixture in this investigation, maintaining a persistent boots-on-the-ground presence while others moved on. His reach is deep, fortified by a network of high-level insiders and unprecedented access to the unfolding drama. Within the heat of Tucson, he pressed for answers that mainstream media ignored, eventually capturing O'Connell's insights on day 67. The revelations she shared during that exchange have been criminally overlooked by the wider narrative surrounding this disappearance. O'Connell's tenure as an FBI special agent within the evidence response team carries a weight that dictates the validity of her subsequent claims. Known as the ERT, this branch serves as the Bureau's most sophisticated laboratory in the field. These operatives are mobilized for the nation's most intricate and high-stakes scenes, including security details for heads of state, large-scale tragedies, and federal felonies where the physical proof is so precarious that any mistake is catastrophic. In these high-pressure environments, a single misstep during collection is more than a professional blunder. It is a lethal blow to the prosecution. Such failures jeopardize the entire legal pursuit. Consequently, these agents undergo rigorous schooling across diverse scientific fields. They master the geometry of bloodstains, the intricacies of digital data, and the delicate extraction of invisible fingerprints and microscopic debris. Within this specialized curriculum, the study of tire patterns is a foundational pillar. These agents are conditioned to identify, document, and stabilize rubber impressions, whether they are found in pristine dirt or amidst the chaos of a compromised landscape. O'Connell was not merely an armchair analyst providing a casual opinion to satisfy a curious audience. She spoke as a veteran expert delivering a clinical evaluation to a journalist, placing her professional reputation on the line for a missing woman. This nuance is vital, demanding that we approach her findings with the same gravity she applied to the evidence itself. Consider the geometry of that circular drive. Long-term followers of this investigation will be familiar with the architecture of the Guthrie residence in Tucson. However, we must examine the spatial logic again, as this specific piece of pavement anchors the most chilling part of the theory. The property features a sweeping, horseshoe-shaped path designed to permit seamless entry and exit without the necessity of shifting into reverse. While seemingly an architectural convenience, its utility in a criminal context is far more profound. This layout is a staple of southwestern suburban design, usually unremarkable. Yet, if we pivot our perspective, a darker utility emerges. Beyond comfort, this curved track functions as a tactical asset, optimized for an instantaneous and fluid getaway. It facilitates a singular motion, approach, execute the objective, and vanish without the vulnerability of reversing into the street. There is no need for conspicuous multi-point turns or backing blindly into the gaze of a potentially watchful neighbor. A driver maintains constant forward momentum and total visual clarity, allowing for a high-speed exit devoid of any fumbling or hesitation. Suppose an abductor's priority was the swift and silent extraction of Nancy Guthrie from her sanctuary. Their goal would be to minimize the window of exposure, keeping the vehicle stationary for the shortest duration possible. That circular loop becomes the perfect staging ground. Entry, loading, and a seamless forward roll into the night. O'Connell echoed this sentiment, candidly informing Brian Anton that her analysis centered on that very stretch of asphalt. In her expert view, that loop was the exact waypoint where the vehicle used to vanish Guthrie was staged. My professional suspicion points toward that circular drive as the specific point of her forced departure. While the rear entrances were secured, a sudden shift likely forced the intruders toward the front of the house. It is possible the neighbor's barking dog disrupted their path. This observation does not stem from a casual viewer glancing at aerial footage and forming a random thought. We are looking at the meticulous professional analysis of a veteran forensic specialist who has spent decades reconstructing complex crime scenes. Her process involves working backward from physical traces to uncover the precise human movements that created them. The theory involves a nearby animal and a bypassed rear exit, raising the critical question, why use the front? The existence of a back gate is documented. Significant analysis has already focused on the property's rear access and the staging possibilities at that door. Why would a seasoned federal forensic expert focus the evidence on the circular driveway at the home's main entrance? At this point, the investigator's hypothesis becomes intensely specific, focusing on a detail that seems almost too ordinary to matter. A canine, a residence situated directly adjacent to the victim's home, kept a dog on the property. According to the forensic breakdown, that animal may have dictated the entire flow of the abduction. The barking likely acted as an unplanned deterrent. A sharp squeak is a high-pitched frequency, and such sounds carry great distances in the dead of night. One must wonder if that specific noise first alerted the animal. Dogs instinctively react to the presence of unidentified strangers. They bark at foreign vehicles, unusual odors, and any presence that fractures the standard rhythm of a quiet neighborhood. Within a silent Tucson residential area, regardless of the exact hour, the world is remarkably still. A dog barking incessantly at a car hidden in a back alley is exactly the kind of trigger that draws attention. It causes a neighbor to part the curtains or switch on a porch light to investigate the noise. It lures residents outside to see what has agitated the animal. The expert believes the dog forced a total change in tactics. An unexpected disturbance at the rear of the home likely compelled the subjects to abandon their original extraction plan. The driver instead pulled into the circular front drive, and they exited through the main door. The revised strategy required moving Nancy through the most visible part of the property. Because the circular drive is open to the street, a vehicle would inevitably leave physical impressions in the loose granite surface. Precision is vital here, as the forensic expert was incredibly careful with her terminology and conclusions. This assessment is rooted in available physical evidence and a microscopic review of aerial drone recordings. Her findings are backed by an extensive career studying how kidnappings are orchestrated. She presented this as a logical model, not an absolute fact. It was offered as a professional reading of the scene, the most operationally sound explanation for the physical traces discovered. However, her delivery was direct enough that these conclusions must be treated with the utmost seriousness. When a specialist of her caliber identifies a specific spot on a map, the forensic consequences of that claim must be explored. Weathered granite, the surface obstacle. This is where the technical details of the investigation become truly pivotal. This specific part of the forensic analysis has been almost entirely ignored by the general media coverage of the case. This detail is essential for understanding the high stakes involved. The victim's driveway was not paved with standard concrete. It wasn't asphalt or stone pavers, nor any of the sealed surfaces found in modern suburban housing developments. The driveway consisted of decomposed granite. That particular material is the key to the entire mystery. That specific layer of earth resting beneath the tires of every arriving vehicle is the primary evidence problem. This material is the central reason why gathering physical proof in this case has been so difficult. Because the drive is made of crushed granite, developing a clear and usable tire impression is an immense challenge. Decomposed granite, or DG, is a natural aggregate formed as stone weathers and disintegrates into small, loose particles over time. It is an incredibly common choice for residential landscaping throughout the arid American Southwest. Across Tucson and Phoenix, it survives the intense heat and allows rare rainwater to drain through to the soil. It requires very little upkeep and maintains a natural appearance that fits the rugged desert aesthetic. Hundreds of thousands of Arizona properties utilize this rock as their primary ground cover. From a criminalistic perspective, however, this material presents massive hurdles for the recovery of physical impressions. The issue is that the rock is never fixed. It is a shifting, granular medium that compacts temporarily under heavy pressure. Unfortunately, that compaction is fleeting and can be easily erased by the wind or subsequent foot traffic. When heavy machinery traverses crushed stone, the grit yields under the immense pressure. The weight carves a ghost of the tread into the earth, mapping exactly where the rubber met the road. Yet these markings are far more precarious than a footprint left in thick mud or heavy clay. A single wandering footstep can erase them entirely. The passage of another vehicle can overwrite the whole narrative. Even the subtle push of a breeze or a light drizzle can cause the evidence to dissolve into nothingness. In the arid wasteland, where shifting winds and extreme heat keep the earth in constant motion, the window to secure these shadows before they vanish is terrifyingly brief. Then there is the optical chaos of the surface itself. The uneven, jagged texture of weathered granite masks what lies beneath. It lacks the smooth clarity of silt, where a tire track screams its presence to any passerby. In reality, the mark is undeniably there. The compression exists, etched into the grain, yet it remains a phantom nearly undetectable without the right optics and the perfect angle of shadow. This presents a unique hurdle for the investigator, the high-stakes dance of oblique illumination. Capturing a trace on granular stone bears no resemblance to photographing a track in soft soil. One cannot simply stand over the gravel, snap a photo in the midday sun, and expect to walk away with a piece of forensic proof. Under the flat, harsh glare of typical lighting, the surface refuses to yield its secrets. The expert pointed to a specific method one used by forensic specialists to pull detail from the most stubborn, granular materials. An elite technician arrives equipped with high-precision scales and an arsenal of specialized tools. They must manipulate their lamps, casting light from extremely low, varied angles to force the hidden ridges of the tire to emerge from the darkness. Oblique lighting demands that the light source sit nearly flush with the ground, skimming across the surface. By raking the beam parallel to the earth, the technician transforms every tiny depression into a deep, dark abyss of shadow. Features that appear non-existent under the overhead sun or soft room lighting suddenly materialize from the void. The contrast created by these artificial shadows provides the lens with the definition it needs to register a meaningful image. You have likely utilized this very principle in your own home without realizing its criminalistic potential. Imagine searching for a lost object or a footprint on a rug by sweeping a beam across the floorboards. In that moment, you were practicing the art of side lighting. Marks that were invisible to the naked eye suddenly leap forward the second the light hits them at a low graze. The same physics apply to these rocky paths. The angle generates a shadow. The shadow builds contrast, and through that contrast, the evidence is born. Deprived of this specific methodology, any hope of documenting the scene is lost. Evidence gathered from granite without these tools is functionally useless, failing both the test of forensic science and the scrutiny of a courtroom. An investigator might intuit that a vehicle sat there. They might even catch a glimpse of the tread if they crawl on their hands and knees, tilting their head to find the perfect glimmer. However, translating that fleeting vision into a measurable, verifiable exhibit for a jury is a far more clinical endeavor. Merely documenting the shape is insufficient. One requires precise context, the introduction of scale. A certified measurement bar must be placed precisely on the same level as the mark. A simple ruler, in this world, is a scientific scale. It is the same principle as those small L-shaped markers you see resting next to a bloody fingerprint in crime scene photos. Furthermore, long-form scales are deployed before any clumsy footsteps can contaminate the soil well before the site is trampled by those ignorant of the surface's fragility. They are protecting what might be the single most damning piece of physical proof hidden within that specific stretch of driveway. This was the exacting mental checklist the expert applied while scrutinizing the aerial surveillance. It served as the cold, hard benchmark for everything she witnessed, and more importantly, everything she did not. She dissected the drone footage with the detached precision of her training. She ignored the cinematic chaos, focusing instead on the cold mechanics of the investigation itself. What actual work was being performed on that dusty stage? She looked for the methodical, scientific rigor that a high-stakes crime scene demands of its processors. Yet, in those frames, there was no sign of anyone actually processing the tracks on the circular drive. The specialized portable rigs used by elite evidence response teams were nowhere to be found. There were no figures crouched in the dirt, no scales being laid, and no cameras capturing the secrets of the stone. The systematic, grid-based mapping of that critical driveway simply did not happen. A chilling absence of activity marked the weathered stone of the circular drive, none of the meticulous impression recovery O'Connell anticipated for a crime scene of this gravity. It is at this precise juncture that O'Connell's commitment to objective truth becomes a pivotal factor in the narrative. She approached this observation with surgical caution, acknowledging that the Bureau might have conducted their work during the windows when Brian Enton's drone was grounded. I failed to witness anyone engaged in the process of lifting impressions from the earth near the front entrance. It never crossed my field of vision. The reality is, once the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrived, we were forced back, though we did manage to keep the drone airborne for a time. The aerial eye was not fixed on the site at 4 a.m, nor during those dark hours before the press descended, or any period where the site was accessed away from public view. Relying solely on fragmented drone footage, O'Connell remains acutely aware that she cannot definitively rule out that the work took place. Her assessment was measured. She respected the boundary between what the evidence showed and what remained hidden in the shadows. She refused to embellish the facts, yet the truth remained. She saw nothing. This void, the lack of documented tire impression work on that granite loop, is the very thing that has haunted her thoughts since day 67. Imagine an elite evidence response team operative scanning a crime scene, searching for the forensic hallmarks that signify a thorough investigation, only to find a haunting stillness where there should have been activity, unable to verify that the protocols were even followed. This observation is the cornerstone of the grave concerns regarding the investigation's chronology. To understand the weight of O'Connell's words, one must look at the larger, more troubling picture. It is a question of temporal precision. In the world of high-stakes forensics, especially within a case of this magnitude involving a web of different agencies, time is the most volatile variable. The record confirms that Nancy Guthrie's estate was never treated as a hermetically sealed vault. The property was not maintained as a continuously isolated, protected crime scene from the moment of discovery until the final grain of evidence was bagged. The perimeter was breached. It became a hive of movement, accessed by various parties for varying reasons, all while under the crushing weight of a high-profile disappearance. A steady stream of vehicles entered and exited that private drive. Personnel moved through the area with little restraint. The chaotic reality of those first hours meant the land was vulnerable. Consider what that implies for a tire track, pressed into soft, decomposed stone. Every single footfall across that driveway acted as an eraser, shifting the delicate grains. Each car that rolled through, and there were many during those critical early windows, essentially crushed and reshaped the very surface that held the secrets of the crime. Every intrusion threatened to erase or distort the unique tire signature left by the vehicle that carried Nancy. The haunting question O'Connell poses is simple. At what point did investigators realize the driveway was a secondary crime scene? More importantly, how long did it take to secure that granite circle and shield it from further contamination? Had the authorities marked the driveway as a key staging area on day one, immediately sealing it off until forensic teams could arrive, the chances of pulling a viable print from the earth would have been high. But if that realization came too late, if the ground was trampled before the forensic plan was even drafted, then a vital window of opportunity slammed shut without a sound. O'Connell chose not to drift into the realm of theory regarding the exact hours. As an outsider, she has no way of knowing when each sector of the property was prioritized by those behind the yellow tape. Yet her concern remains a concern rooted in the cold, hard science of forensics, stripped of emotion and speculation, focusing solely on the physical decay of evidence and the unforgiving passage of time. The Bureau's tire database. One must understand the sheer power of what the Bureau can achieve with a single, high-quality impression preserved in time. This context is vital to grasping exactly what may have been lost forever on that circular drive. The Federal Bureau of Investigation maintains massive archives of tire tread signatures, allowing specialists to link a scene to a specific manufacturer's pattern. These records have been meticulously curated over decades, spanning nearly every consumer and commercial vehicle tire on the market. In the eyes of a forensic examiner, a tire tread is a signature as unique as a human fingerprint. Deep within the Bureau's archives lies a digital library of every conceivable tread pattern, allowing us to scrutinize forensic imagery to establish an initial link between a phantom track and its rubber architect. Identifying the model acts as a filter, excluding vast swaths of transport since specific frames demand specific footprints. A rugged, all-terrain mark left in the soil speaks volumes, whispering of a heavy-duty frame or a mountain-ready rig. A standard sedan's signature steers the search down a completely different path of investigative inquiry. Should the resolution of the cast be sharp enough, revealing unique scars of travel and irregular erosion of the rubber, such as punctures or factory defects, analysts can pinpoint a solitary, specific wheel instead of a mere category. This level of detail is rare and frequently scrutinized, yet it remains a vital forensic tool. Analyzing tread marks is a venerable science, fortified by decades of established legal precedents and expert testimony. Federal courts have long validated its status as credible evidence. The Bureau poured immense resources into this craft, and O'Connell's entire professional life was spent within these sterile, analytical halls. Essentially, we are looking at a cold, logical progression, a chain of deduction. A pristine, measured image taken from Nancy's circular drive might expose the tread model, which in turn isolates the vehicle's blueprint. That blueprint, fused with grainy security tapes and eyewitness accounts, begins to narrow the scope, and digital footprints might unmask a unique car. That car leads directly to the shadows who vanished with Nancy. This sequence from soil to rubber to metal to man cannot exist without that initial ghost on the ground. It began in the weathered stone of the front drive, frozen in time while the crime scene remained undisturbed and silent. The backdoor manipulation link. We must place this within the intricate puzzle we have assembled. O'Connell's driveway hypothesis is not an isolated thought. It bridges to a familiar darkness, reinforcing the structural integrity of our collective investigation. Much focus has been placed on the theory that the back of the property was a theater of intentional deception, where an open door and rearranged landscape were meticulously crafted to suggest a narrative that feels hollow and manufactured. This specific line of inquiry has haunted the minds of those following this case from the very start. Observe how these two distinct concepts align, merging not as rivals, but as a singular, chilling blueprint. If the rear scene was merely a decoy, a calculated distraction to lure eyes away from Nancy's true exit point, then the transport vehicle likely waited in the shadows of an entirely different spot. The back creates the myth, the front hides the reality. Suddenly, that circular drive is no longer just a path, it is the epicenter. Or perhaps considering the dog's behavior, it was a desperate secondary choice. If a disturbance ruined the primary plan at the gate, the front drive became a hasty, improvised stage. With the rear exit blocked, the driver pivoted to the front, executing a frantic departure through the circle, etching scars into the crushed stone that may or may not have been documented before the world rushed in. Regardless of whether it was a ruse or a failure at the rear entrance, the front drive becomes the most significant operational site of the crime. Any trace evidence lifted from that ground holds the skeleton key to this entire mystery. Two divergent paths of inquiry, seemingly at odds, now converge on a singular, grim reality. We must address the unknowns. I will be blunt about our blind spots. Because we do not trade in rumors, you deserve the truth. We cannot confirm if federal agents successfully pulled any physical casts from that circular drive. We are blind to whether an attempt was even made, or precisely when such a task might have occurred. We lack confirmation on whether any collected tracks ever found a match within the Bureau's digital library. It is unknown if the driveway was cordoned off or trampled by boots before the experts could arrive, and how severely their secrets remain locked away. The official case file is a fortress to which we have no key. Our analysis relies solely on the public ledger. But what remains etched in the official history is this. Maureen O'Connell, a former special agent who once served on the FBI's Elite Evidence Response Unit, provides a chilling perspective. After scrutinizing drone perspectives of the Guthrie estate, she observed a glaring absence of forensic tire casting within the circular driveway. The property's surface, composed of crumbled granite, presents a formidable psychological and technical hurdle for capturing any physical impressions. In her expert estimation, that specific circular drive served as the cold, calculated staging ground for the vehicle used to vanish Nancy. With a heavy sense of urgency, she placed a disturbing concern onto the public record, suggesting that if those impressions weren't secured immediately, a ghost-like piece of evidence, the vehicle's identity might have evaporated into thin air. This isn't online conjecture or whispered rumors. This is a seasoned forensic veteran offering a grim, documented reality to a journalist regarding an active, breathing investigation. It carries the chilling authority of her career and demands we listen with a matching intensity. Then, there is the unsettling wall of silence from the Bureau. We must connect O'Connell's findings to a larger, more enigmatic pattern that has haunted this community since the first hours of the search. The FBI has maintained an icy distance, remaining tight-lipped about their findings and the general direction of the manhunt. It's important to be precise here, as investigators typically operate in the shadows to protect the integrity of a case. Standard procedure dictates this secrecy to avoid tipping off suspects or tainting future prosecution. It is the nature of the beast. However, the quiet surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is abnormally profound, sparking alarm among veteran crime reporters, clinical forensic experts, and retired detectives who understand the typical rhythm of high-stakes missing persons cases. They aren't just withholding details. They have effectively refused to acknowledge even the most basic facts of the investigation. Experienced reporters have chronicled the exhausting struggle to pull even a single grain of meaningful information from the Bureau's iron grasp. O'Connell stepped forward precisely because the official narrative provided to the public remains hauntingly empty. She was forced to analyze the scraps available because the formal investigation has offered almost nothing for public consumption. We are aware of the FBI's presence and that they process the scene at some point in the timeline. One assumes they are grinding away behind closed doors, utilizing the immense technological reach that only the Bureau possesses. Yet, the public record remains a void. We have no confirmation of what the crime scene surrendered, what the forensic sweep yielded, or if those critical tire marks in the driveway were ever properly documented. And if they were, what secrets do they hold? There is one specific artifact that has captivated those obsessed with the details of this mystery. A lone black glove, discarded in a desolate field just 2 miles from where Nancy was last seen. Federal agents noted that, while not a forensic twin, the glove is a striking visual match to the one seen on the predator in the doorbell footage. But its true significance lies in its hidden biological weight, as it contained the DNA that transformed it into the most vital piece of evidence found outside the house. The clock began ticking when the Pima County Sheriff's Department rushed the glove to a specialized Florida laboratory on the evening of Thursday, February 12th. It reached the facility on Friday, with the first chilling results emerging by Saturday morning. The analysis confirmed the presence of genetic material belonging to an unidentified male, a stranger with no ties to Nancy or her inner circle. The FBI then took the profile for rigorous verification and quality checks. Once validated, that genetic ghost was uploaded into CODIS, the massive national DNA indexing system. The software then began its relentless scan against millions of profiles stored within the digital labyrinth. If this individual has a history, an arrest for a serious crime in any state, his identity is waiting in CODIS. A felony conviction almost guarantees he is there. If he was ever forced to provide a sample for parole, probation, or as a registered sex offender, his DNA is logged. This system is vast and never sleeps, often returning matches in mere hours. But we must confront a cold reality. CODIS is only a mirror. It can only show us what is already in its memory. If this predator has managed to avoid the system his entire life, the database will remain silent. That is the system's fatal flaw, which is why investigators are likely turning to the complex world of third-party genetic genealogy. Officials are currently holding their breath for the final forensic reports on that glove found in the Arizona desert. Those definitive answers could arrive as early as today. The FBI continues to maintain that the glove bears a haunting resemblance to the one worn by the abductor during those final, terrifying seconds on camera. For over 40 years, Joseph DeAngelo remained a ghost, successfully eluding every trap set by the law. His 2018 capture resulted not from criminal databases, but from a distant relative's decision to upload genetic data to a public site. Detectives meticulously traced a lineage, filtered through potential suspects, and confirmed his biological signature through covert physical surveillance. A mystery that had remained frozen for 4 decades was finally unraveled in 4 months once genetic tracing entered the equation. Regarding the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, 2 investigative paths are moving in tandem, with national databases currently scanning for matches. Specialized genetic teams are poised to act. One of these forensic systems will inevitably name a suspect. It is simply a matter of time. Every individual who has shared their genetic code with ancestry platforms has effectively become a silent witness in this unfolding kidnapping investigation. A perpetrator's biological code functions as a permanent fingerprint, a digital mugshot, and a silent admission of guilt, all intertwined. They inadvertently left that incriminating evidence behind on that single glove. Now, the full weight of the American forensic machine is processing it as the scientific net closes in with relentless precision. However, genetic material is merely one component of the technological dragnet currently deployed in this search. The Cellular Analysis Survey Team, known as CAST, remains one of the Bureau's most vital assets for high-stakes cases like this. Former federal supervisors suggest that experts are currently sifting through massive volumes of network data from the night of the abduction. Every mobile device active near the residence between midnight and 4 a.m. on February 1st left a trace on local relay towers. Forensic analysts now possess the capability to map exactly which handsets were present at the scene. They can determine the duration of the stay and shadow the exact path of the retreat. If the captor carried a phone, a nearly unavoidable modern habit, CAST has already reconstructed the movement of every signal that night. A seasoned investigator recently shared a chilling insight that should terrify whoever is currently holding the victim. He indicated that authorities likely possess a list of scrutinized names, with some cleared while others remain under invisible observation. This is the iceberg effect. The public briefings and warrants represent only the visible 10% of a much deeper operation. Beneath the surface, the Federal Bureau is constructing a case using classified tools and data streams that remain entirely secret. When these efforts finally breach the surface, the result will not be a press release, but the sound of locking handcuffs. We now reach the strategic pivot. 2 targeted messages were broadcast to the captor within the last 24 hours, one from the daughter. The other came from the president, creating a psychological vice unparalleled in the history of modern kidnapping investigations. There may be an associate or a confidant who is harboring a secret they do not yet fully comprehend. It could be a family member, a close friend, or perhaps a neighbor. Anyone who observed an unsettling shift in behavior around early February must realize their insight is the missing piece of this puzzle. Throughout this nation, there are many women in their 80s who live in a state of profound vulnerability. They reside alone in quiet homes with circular drives and arid gardens, where only a neighbor's barking dog breaks the silence. These women and their distant families exist under the fragile assumption that a tranquil residential street is inherently secure. The ultimate truth of Nancy Guthrie's fate remains a dark enigma, and we refuse to offer false certainties where none exist. This tragedy unfolded in a Tucson neighborhood, near a property marked by a driveway of crushed stone and desert earth. There is a terrifying possibility that the window for securing vital forensic evidence closed before anyone knew where to look. In every major investigation, that critical window of opportunity inevitably begins to shut. Whether a disappearance or a crime scene, the initial hours dictate the survival of physical proof. Time is the enemy of evidence. This reality is not a failure of the current personnel, but a fundamental challenge of forensic science. It is the brutal nature of how environments decay and how time erodes the integrity of physical material at a scene. The fundamental concern is whether the right clues were shielded in time. What distinguishes this case is the collective audience watching. This community has observed every pulse of the search, from the initial alarm through 67 days of aerial surveys and interviews. Every official testimony and expert analysis has been weighed by a public that remains committed to an evidence-based pursuit of truth. The persistence of seasoned practitioners and dedicated journalists in asking technical, substantiated questions is often what finally shatters a case. Success rarely comes through theatrical displays or sudden cinematic twists. It is achieved through a patient, relentless focus on the minutiae that others overlook. Our eyes will remain fixed on the details. We are committed to documenting every pulse of this inquiry, recording every official word uttered by those leading the search. We will parse every federal briefing, and perhaps more significantly, the strategic silences the authorities choose to maintain. Whenever the evidence pivots, we attempt to pierce the cold silence surrounding Nancy's fate. This film is produced for educational and informative purposes only. The theories explored are synthesized solely from the wealth of records within the public domain. We rely upon the documented testimonies of named sources and the rigorous reporting of accredited investigative journalists. No person is cast as a suspect in this analysis. This profile serves as a psychological study, not a legal judgment or professional advice. Sources are credited as they appear. Claims resting on a single person's word are explicitly noted within the film. Logical inferences are labeled as analysis, remaining distinct from the cold, unyielding facts of the case. If you possess information regarding the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the FBI or the Puma County Sheriff's Department.